And you need to consider the teaching style, what methods you're using, how we're doing groupings, and there's several questions you can ask yourself. You notice I'm not starting with the learner. I'm starting with our instructional strategies, our intervention, the way we teach, to see if there's a mismatch in that. So what are the class expectations? Are they clear? Are they written so that everybody understands them? What types of strategies work best? What data do I have to support that these strategies are the best strategies for this kid? Am I collecting data to make decisions about instruction for this child? How is student progress monitored, and what % of the time is spent in instruction? A lot of you are doing practicums and into student teaching now, and I would recommend that when you're in a school, sometime you just say, I just want to sit back today and do some observing. Take a little timer that you can stopwatch, you can turn on and off. Turn it on when there's actual instruction going on, turn it off when there's not. And at the end of your hour and a half, see how many minutes of actual instruction were occurring. And then look at the kids that are struggling. And then look at what's happening in that time that's not instruction. It'll surprise you, I think. We say we don't have enough time to give kids that extra supplemental support, and I think we do. I think it's just looking at how we do business a little bit differently. Curriculum, another piece to look at. We need to make sure that our instructional materials are sound, and that we have standards and benchmarks, and that these materials relate to those standards and benchmarks. Benchmarks are those measurable guides to the standards. They should be measurable. We should know pretty much at a given point in time where a kiddo is in relationship to those benchmarks. And to do that, you have to have some kind of progress monitoring tool or screening tool that you do a few times a year. Really key. But if we look at our curriculum, we need to ask what the benchmarks are. Is the pacing appropriate? Is the readability of the textbooks? Happens a lot with the middle school, high school kids. They may be third grade readers. We're expecting them to go home and read a chapter in social studies that's usually at an 8th grade or above level. Difficult. Do the kids have the prerequisite skills? Do I even know, as a 4th grade teacher, the scope and sequence of skills that a kid needs to be able to do fractions in my class? Making sure that our curriculum is seamless, moves K-5 or 6-8. Do we have transitions in place for kids with curriculum? My daughter goes to a public school this year, and the elementary school that she didn't go to, but that a lot of kids are coming in from, used a program called Everyday Math. And I'm not going to say anything good or bad, I'm neutral about Everyday Math, because the district I work in uses that as well. But the problem is then they get to high school, and they have a traditional math program. Totally traditional. There's no transition for these kids from this Everyday Math program, which is very different than a traditional math program. And guess what? Freshman math teachers are complaining because these kids aren't coming in with what they would expect them to come in. Doesn't mean they're not going to get it, but there's been no discussion from elementary to middle to high school to talk about how do we transition these kids from this kind of a program to a completely different program and make sure we know what they're learning. And what measurement tools are we using? Another big piece is the environment. And boy, this is probably the clincher for you guys. If kids having difficulty, ask these questions and look at the physical arrangement of your room. Where's the student in the room when important information is being presented if they don't ever seem to be getting the information? Sitting next to the teacher is not always the best solution, because sitting next to the teacher sometimes is the busiest spot in the room, right? You can ask my 5th grade son where he wants to sit. He'll tell you. I like it back over here toward the back. I can see everything that's going on, but I don't have as many distractions and people walking around me. Oh, okay then. We'll put you over here in the back. But guess what? They change the desks around all the time. And they change his all the time. I'm like, why don't you just leave him in the back? He likes it back there. He's learning back there. So you gotta think about those things. Yeah, it's great to change the desks and have kids sit by different peers, which a lot of us do. But think about that for the kiddo that's having difficulty. Is that really the best environment for that kid? Making sure classroom rules are there, they're developed, they're posted, they're enforced consistently. I shouldn't even have to mention lots of positive reinforcement for good behaviors, right? Are there any individual behavior plans? What about established routines? Do you have, if you're in elementary, I don't care, all the way up to 5th grade, do you have picture cues for your routines? It doesn't just help a few kids, it helps a lot of kids. Just still up into the upper elementary, just have a picture cue up there. Let the kids make the picture cues. Is there a difference in performance when the group size changes? Does this kid work better when half your class is with you in a small group and the other half is working independently? Lots of questions to ask yourself about our environment and how that's affecting the student's behavior. So we still haven't looked at the student as the problem yet. We've looked at instruction, we've looked at our curriculum and the environment that the student's in before we even say, what else? And in this case, it's the learner. So does the child, we have to consider some of their physical, motor, health, behavioral, academic issues and needs, but we can ask ourselves some questions about the learner that might help us think about our instruction, the appropriateness of our curriculum, and how we have them in our environment. Does the student demonstrate evidence of good thinking? Do they have good work habits? Is part of the problem we just need to teach them some executive functioning skills to be more organized, be able to transition from activity to activity seamlessly? I still don't even do that. And I followed Richard around all day today. Whew. I kept saying, what's next? Didn't I, Richard? What's next? What's next on our plan? So what can we do about all this, given the fact that we're asking all these questions about instruction and our curriculum and our environment and our learning? We can look at some replacement or alternative behaviors to teach the child, because it's not always easy to go from the inappropriate behavior straight to the appropriate behavior, because if we could do that, the kid would already be doing that, right? So we need to think of some alternative behavior that would be okay. We also have to look at what do we want to increase, what do we want to decrease? Are we trying to maintain something? Oops, sorry, that's my mouse. Oops, how many times did I do that? So the replacement behaviors serve the same function. They're reasonable and they take into account the intermediate attempts that we might want to go through, prerequisite skills to the desired behavior, if you will, and they're as natural and logical as possible. When we look at social skills, what we're trying to do is help kids generalize those skills into the classroom setting. I'm not a big proponent of social skills taught outside of the classroom. I think it should be as much teachable moments as possible. Maybe doing some role playing outside the classroom. But I have kids who had emotional behavioral disabilities, and they were awesome performers on their social skills in the social skills environment when we were doing role playing. But step them out into the 5th grade classroom, they were generalizing those behaviors at all. And I'd say, do you remember when we were in? Oh yeah, I remember that. Well, that's what we're supposed to do in here. Much better for me to go in there and say, oh, stop, let's talk about this behavior. Teachable moments for those. Sometimes it's just general skill development that's causing some of the behavioral challenges. And hey, sometimes kids are really gifted and they're bored to death. And that's causing some of the behavioral challenges. Did you know one of our highest dropout rates are gifted students? Serious. Do they have problem-solving deficits? They need help with how to solve problems and self-management issues. That's kind of what I was saying with executive functions. What is it that is going on in their brain, and how do they organize information, and how do they manage their self-awareness, their motivation, their self-control? So when we're going to conduct a functional assessment, we have to do a few things. We have to operationally define the behavior. I want it measurable. I want to be able to look at it, see it, taste it, hear it, whatever. I want to know what that behavior is. The student will be able to what? To what degree, by when? I can make it measurable, right? Make it measurable and align it to your benchmarks and your standards. A lot of you will say, well, we don't have behavioral benchmarks and standards. Yeah, I know. But we're working on them. And you can lean onto the Positive Behavioral Support. The pbis.org website is a great starting point for coming up with what some of those might look like. Then the next thing we do is determine if and why the behavior is a problem. Why are we even changing the behavior? What is it? We need to know the rationale for the behavior change. Because I don't like it. It's disrespectful. That's a good enough reason for me as a parent. She can argue with that and roll her eyes all she wants. Identify how often and for how long the behavior occurs. That's that how frequency and amount of time. When is this behavior happening? How long does it happen? How often does it occur? You know, in the case of tantrums, are they 10-minute tantrums, 5-minute tantrums? And what is the antecedent? So you really have to do some observations over time to say, wow, I can see a pattern now. Every time this behavior happens, this kid was involved. The interaction between this kid and this kid, I see this behavior. Or, wow, every time this behavior happens, we're moving from one classroom or one environment to another. So they're having difficulty with the transition. What can I do with the transition? Not what can I do to fix the kid. What can I do in the transition process to help that student be able to be more successful? And eventually, the kid will learn, right, how to transition, because you're teaching them. Interviews are really important, not only with the classroom teacher, but any adult that works with the child, because you're going to get very different information, I betcha, from the music teacher for my son than you are going to get from the 4th grade teacher. And you're going to get really different information from the after-school program than you are going to get from me. Interviews. And my son, he's pretty articulate. You ask him what's going on, he's going to tell you. Probably more than I want you to know, but he'll let you know. This is the situation, and this is how it goes, and this is what works best for me, and it's all his fault. He's still kind of at that blaming stage. Then we have to look at that functional assessment, take the data and analyze the data and see where the patterns are, see where the consistencies are in the behavior, whether it's you know, in the different environments that the kid's in, and see if we can identify what that function of the behavior is.